Yesterday on Ramblings with Rebecca, I was very naughty and went for 8 minutes instead of 5. I'm sorry, 5 today, honestly. But we talked about the legal criteria for statehood, and one of those is recognition, which is to say that other states have to recognize you as a state. This, of course, becomes a funny chicken and egg circle argument, right? In that to legally be a state, other states have to recognize you as a state, but you have to recognize them as a state for them to be states in order for there to be international law. Right, it's funny, right? Because international law is on this arena, again, without a global cop, without anyone, absolutely at the top setting the rules for the game, which means that the most powerful states do, but they're not explicitly at the top in some ways, because in international law, in the international arena, a state is a state is a state, and all states are equal. Now, of course, we know in practical terms that is not true. And this certainly is true when it comes to recognition. Law and politics are, of course, inextricably bound, whether or not we want them to be. And this certainly comes into play with legal statehood, because recognition is such an intrinsic and vital part of legal statehood in most places. That becomes very political quite quickly. Other states treating you like a state, calling you a state, including you in their international relations, is a core component of statehood. But that willingness to recognize a state is motivated by alliances and aspirations, generally driven by political rather than legal rational, perhaps economic as well. There are laws governing recognition. So, for example, the international law says that you can't recognize a new state if the new state has come into existence through violating international law. So, if a group perpetuates horrific war crimes or somehow goes against conflict law and sets up a new state by doing that, international law says that can't be recognized as a state. It's illegal to recognize them. So this has implications for certain semi-state actors or wannabe states or militant groups and that kind of thing, if they are tempted to work towards statehood through illegal means. But of course, it can also be used by those groups to push against current state status of other actors. So Palestine and Taiwan might be slapped by China and Israel for, illegal acts furthering statehood, but of course Palestine and Taiwan can also slap China and Israel in the international arena saying, you became states illegally through XYZ. Which, of course, of those arguments or narratives is true is very open for debate, and which side ends up winning tends to be apolitical. These big, powerful states with this friend said this was illegal and this wasn't, which is perhaps one of the most unfortunate parts of international law without, again, this global cop. The big boys on the playground, and us, big girls, the big bullies on the playground, get to decide, right? Like what is and is not a state, given this legal recognition complexity with political and legal issues intertwined. However, the good news is that recognition is very strongly tied to involvement in international organizations and institutions. A state signing a formal treaty with another actor involves some kind of recognition, even if it is not a state, as explicitly as a state. So the fact that Israel has signed agreements with Palestine, even when it doesn't say the state of Palestine, and especially when it does, is some kind of recognition that is furthering Palestine's support for legal statehood, I would say. And same thing with any other semi-state actor. So, the point of my dissertation was to look at, in this increasingly globalized world of environmental regulation, a lot of recognition of statehood can include being on, your river commission, being a trading partner, tackling environmental regulation problems together, those kinds of things. And hopefully, semi-state actors or wannabe states that perhaps should be states can push their agendas through these kind of legal recognition means by participating at the international level as a state. Act like a state, encourage others to treat you like a state, and you become a state.